Hello, everyone. Welcome to session 12, Second Chronicles 36. So this is going to be perhaps a little challenging for us because we've already looked at a very similar circumstance back in 2 Kings 17, where we were looking at the destruction of Israel being talked about in the main concourse of the context. But again, the destruction of Judah is alluded to. Now we are actually at that point, but we're looking at it from the vantage of what the chronicler has to say, right? So here, what I'm doing is pointing out some intertextual linkings between Nebuchadnezzar the second, or referred to by history and antiquity as Nebuchadnezzar the Great, and Jehu for the way that they were utilized by Yahweh and raised up at the times they were. Remember this concept and reverberating cyclical pattern of exile following up with a new Exodus movement in which God is raising up deliverers to execute both vengeance upon those who are responsible for leading God's people astray or oppressing them, but whether physically and or spiritually, and then bringing them into new creation moments here. So here we're going to read through the story of Jeremiah 25, 2 Kings 25, and portions of 2 Chronicles 36 here. So we have from what the Lord quotes through Jeremiah, I'm going to send for my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and will bring him against this land, its residents, all the surrounding nations. So it's interesting because he was appointed by Yahweh for this particular task, though he was a pagan king who did not acknowledge Yahweh as a valid deity or one worthy of worship at the time when he was executing God's wrath against his people until he has his reckoning with Daniel, no doubt. But that's a story for a different time. We are told by the writer of Kings that direction was given directly to Elijah to anoint Jehu, the son of Nimshi, as king over Israel, and Jehu will put to death whoever escapes the sword of Hazael. So that being said, he becomes Yahweh's appointed servant, physically anointed. We don't have that concept here with Nebuchadnezzar, but he is chosen much in the same way that Cyrus is pronounced by the Lord through the prophet Isaiah to be his anointed one that is going to bring retribution, but at the same time, deliverance and restoration for many peoples, including the Israelites. So both kings were raised up to deliver justice against idolatrous Israel, Jehu in the days of Ahab, Nebuchadnezzar in the days of Zedekiah, and other sons of Josiah, and they are styled as Yahweh's servants. Moving forward, 2 Kings 25. So the Chaldeans seized the king. This is Zedekiah, the last of the Davidic kings, brought him to the king of Babylon. Obviously, this is Nebuchadnezzar at Riblah, and they passed sentence on him. So he watches his sons executed, and his eyes are put out. Presumably, he goes off to Babylon and there dies. Whereas with Jehu, it's a bit more violent. So Jehu drew his bow and he shot Joram. So Joram, or Jehoram also, is the son of Ahab, and he becomes his successor. He shot him in between the shoulders, and the arrow went through his heart, and he slumped down in his chariot, obviously dead. So both of these people are wicked kings. They are said to have rebelled against the Lord, and so justice was executed upon them because of their rebellion against Yahweh by these appointed servants directly, i.e., these handpicked kings raised up to be Yahweh's servants exacted vengeance upon wicked Israelite kings ruling the lands that they were responsible for at the time. So back to 2 Chronicles 36 now. So he brought up against the king. So he brought up against them the king of the Chaldeans, again Nebuchadnezzar, who killed their fit young men with the sword. We go back to the story of Jehu, another hand-picked deliverer. So Jehu killed all who remained in the house of Ahab in Jezreel, all his great men, close friends, and priests, leaving him no survivors. It's interesting how this is shared in common between the two. So both kings put large numbers of soldiers and those loyal to the kings of either Israel and or Judah to death at this particular moment. And of course, Jehu actually had several of the house of David caught up in this conflagration too, because he didn't just kill that Jehoram, he also killed the Jehoram that was ruling as the successor of Jehoshaphat in Judah as well, creating a power vacuum that led to the only queen who ruled over Judah for a time. So anyway, we go now to Chronicles 36:17 again. We're using the same passage, but I expanded it here. This dot, dot, dot now replaced with the phrase in the house of the sanctuary, right? So Murder also took place in the very temple construct itself, which we go to the story of Jehu, and we see that when he was finished offering burnt offerings, so he created a ruse here where he called together a special session for offerings to be made in the temple of Baal, and all the priests were to be gathered there. And he starts this off by offering a burnt offering, supposedly asking Baal to bequeath upon him his blessing for rightful, legitimized rule over the people of Israel and to serve as his guardian and protector, blah, blah, blah. Then Jehu walks out and he tells his guards and officers to go in and kill everyone. Do not let anyone out. And so they struck them all down with the sword in this particular sacred place. So both kings put to death those who worshiped false gods, because clearly in this sanctuary, when you read the words of Ezekiel as he's taken in spirit to see what's going on here, we have all kinds of depraved practices happening in the very confines of the temple courts itself, other gods being worshipped. And this wasn't only during that time, it was also in the days of Manasseh as well, right? So then we have the fact that the Chaldeans burned God's temple. They tore down Jerusalem's wall and burned all of its palaces, destroying all of its valuable articles. So Jehu wasn't done with just killing all of the priestly class and the offerers who came there to worship with him. They brought out the temple of Baal. They burned it. They tore down the pillar of Baal, and they tore down the entire temple of Baal and made it into a latrine. Couldn't be more degrading than that. So both kings destroyed temples that were used for idolatrous sacrifices offered in opposition to Yahweh. Lastly, in Second Chronicles 36, Nebuchadnezzar had no pity on young men or young women, young men or women, elderly or aged. He handed them all over. He, of course, being Yahweh, but the fact that, and the he here could also be Yahweh as far as the use of the pronoun here. But whether it was Yahweh who had no pity on the Israelites, when he turned them over to Nebuchadnezzar, they were decimated. They were completely destroyed. They were killed. So Nebuchadnezzar, giving his field commander's orders, had no pity on them either. The only person we have any record of him having any pity on was Jeremiah in his bedraggled state after he winds up coming out of the king's palace when this whole thing is done. And Nebuzaradan, the commander of the king's guard and second in command in the field, told him basically he can live wherever he wants. He can either come off and receive the same sentence that the Israelites were, but he would be cared for if he goes to Babylon, or he could stay here amongst these exiles in the land, right? So then we go back to Deuteronomy 7. That's a breakaway from the Jehu story, but this is what we are told through the words of Moses to the people of Israel. They must destroy all the peoples that the Lord your God is delivering over to you and not look upon them with pity. So, in other words, the angle that of view that the Israelites are supposed to have toward the Canaanites is that they are the targets of Yahweh's wrath, and they must be judged and destroyed, and they cannot exercise pity, because if they do, these people will become thorns in their sides. Now the Israelites have become the Canaanites, and now God is using the Chaldeans as the new Israelites to come and wipe them out of the land. And like Joshua, had no pity upon those people. Nebuchadnezzar is functioning like him, only this time he's conquering the new Canaanites, i.e., Israel, to push them out of the land, which is exactly what Yahweh said would happen, right? So this is a hearkening back, perhaps, to the Jehu story to show that Nebuchadnezzar is being utilized in the same way that Jehu was in the wicked days of Ahab. And sadly, the kingdom that Ahab ruled over has now become the very one and the same with respect to the Judah that Josiah's sons rule over, and it has brought Yahweh's vengeance and condemnation upon. So more to unpack on that later.